Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. My next guest is one of the top economists in the country. He ran the World Bank during Donald Trump's first term in office. He has been in the financial markets. He is one of the go-to guys if you want to understand what's happening with money, with inflation, with taxes, and, of course, with economic growth, which we don't have enough of in this country. David, thanks so much for joining this afternoon.
Hi, Steve. Happy to.
So I've got so much I want to cover with you, David. You had an excellent piece in the Wall Street Journal, a week or two ago about the debt limit. And you were saying that what we need is safeguards to stop. And I want you to explain to my listeners what you meant. You said we have to have like these guardrails to make sure that the government spending does not, gallop out of control as it has. So what are you suggesting? This was a piece you had in the Wall Street Journal about 7 to 10 days ago.
Yeah. So what the government, I think, is out of control right now. We need to separate the spending from the taxes. It already collects huge amounts of taxes. So the question is, how do you get at spending? Right now, there are really no constraints on how much they spend. They talk about.
Well, by the way, we used to have we had like something called the Budget Control Act a few years ago, which I was a big fan of. It did set some ceilings on spending, and then Congress got rid of it.
Yes, and that's because it wasn't permanent, and we don't really have any permanent restraint. If you go back to the Constitution, it should have a clause in there that says the people need to be protected from an overly big government. But they didn't at the time, and we've never really remedied that. So what we end up with is this debt limit that doesn't work right now. It says, they get to spend all the money they want, and then after the fact, if they don't pay for it, we default on the national debt. It's really dumb. And President Trump was exactly right in saying that at the end of the year. He looked at it and said, the Democrats have spent all this money, and now they won't clear the debt limit, and so it's threatening a default. So
I think that's unfair. I think it's unfair for Trump to walk into the Oval Office and then have this enormous debt that was run up by Biden, and then have to be. I agree with you entirely on that. Now, what kind of spending reforms are you suggesting?
The first point I want to make is that the current debt limit doesn't protect us, so we need a new one. And once you make that leap, then you get a different dynamic. Rather than having one of these deals like the one you were talking about, which is temporary and in the end doesn't actually restrain government very much. We need something that's a more permanent barrier to overspending government. And if you accept that, then we can talk about what are the terms. One would be you could do it in terms of spending 24% of GDP and no more than that, except in time of war. That would be one formulation. I've suggested the easy way to do it is when the debt to GDP ratio is above 100%, then you make it harder for them to spend new money.
How?
Well, you can say that they have to have a higher percentage vote, or you can say that they can't get raises until they identify spending cuts. You can give the president more authority, impoundment authority and rescission authority when you're over the debt limit. That way it's acceptable to Congress. It's when they throw their hands up and say, we're out of control and we can't do anything about ourselves, then give the president some power to choose which spending not to do. Richard Nixon had that, and all previous presidents did, but the Democrats took it away in 1974.
So I like your idea, except there's one thing I don't like about it, David. You say a 24% cap. Historically, the government almost never spent more than 20% of our GDP, except during times of war. So I think you're maybe giving them too much money to spend.
Good. Exactly. So let's have a debate and say 21%, and then collect votes in Congress. But what you have to start with is the idea that the current debt limit is really bad for fiscal conservatives because it pretends it's a fake limit, and that gives Democrats all the coverage to keep spending wildly. That Ronald
and it
Reagan
seems like,
faced,
yeah.
I
was just going to say that it seems like you and I have been involved in these fights since the Reagan years, and no matter whether it's a Republican Congress and a Democratic president or a Republican president, a Democratic Congress, or whatever the configuration is, it seems like Republicans always get blamed for the debt ceiling.
That's right, because they're the ones that want to be responsible, but they're stuck with this bad law. So that's the real critical thing. And we should start right now, tomorrow, debating, just like you and I are, over should it be 21% or what are the penalties that you could put on Washington? You saw President Biden yesterday was trying to do 2 new monuments. One way to do it is to say Washington may not propose new monuments while we're above the debt limit. And that would, light a fire under them to do something about this. A critical point here is the financial markets need this kind of stability. You see bond yields going up right now. One reason is because the whole world can see that the U.S. government spending is out of control.
So I'm talking to David Malpass, who's one of the top economists in the country, if not the world. He, in fact, ran the World Bank when Donald Trump was president, did an excellent job. So you know what's going on around the world with the economies just about as well as anyone I could possibly imagine, David. And I want to run something by you because I wrote a piece a few weeks ago saying that I thought this kind of Trumpism revolution that we've seen in the United States and the power to the people movement, I had anticipated that this kind of thing might happen all over the world. You might see it in Canada, you might see it in Britain, you might see it in Germany and France and Japan and Korea and in South American countries as well. And lo and behold, a week and a half later, Justin Trudeau is out in Canada. And that you have a better feel for what's happening around the world than I do. But do you sense there's a lot of angst and anxiety among the populace about these, what I think are self-serving and arrogant and out-of-touch politicians?
Absolutely. And people feel it in their income. In the U.S., it was affordability. In each country, they label it different. But people in the middle of the income scale are feeling the pressure of inflation and of small businesses not getting enough capital. So I think we have to say this is socialism is on the run. President Trump comes in and identifies Kamala Harris and the Biden policies as socialist, and they're on the run. So let's have that be globally. I dream of a world where you could have actual governments, people having freedom in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Lebanon. These are countries that could hold their own weight and allow people some advancement. They're not doing it, but Trump can help.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great point, and I hope we see more of this kind of populist revolt because I do think the governing class has lost the respect and the support of the governed, and it's about time we remove these people and put people who really care about the people they're supposed to be representing, not themselves. Now, I want to bring up one other subject, David Malpass, and that is what is happening with inflation in the United States. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but again, in our hotline this week, which I know you get, we said we're worried about inflation. We don't think the fight against inflation is over. And you're seeing creeping up in these long-term interest rates. You're seeing commodity prices starting to drift back upward. How big of a problem is this? Because I think if we see inflation when Trump comes back into office, that could really disrupt. People are sick and tired of higher prices.
They are. So affordability is going to be, a permanent. I hope it will be a permanent issue for the voters. But you can stop the inflation by more production. And
yes.
So I think of it as a battle between the powers of government to slow things down. You saw it with Biden putting off limits the offshore drilling, and Trump coming in saying, I actually want businesses to be able to invest more. He can win on that, and it will bring inflation down. But it's going to take month by month by month. I'm a little worried that the mainstream media, the press, will be talking about the inflation months from now and saying it's somehow related to Trump. It's really important how the communication is done now, that we have leftover, unproductiveness from Biden all over the place. It's every dishwasher that doesn't work. And so that can be fixed, but it's going, you have to communicate it to the public the way Malaya is doing in Argentina. He comes in and says, we've had a disaster government, and I need a 1-year honeymoon in order to fix this. And I hope we get that.
You and I think exactly alike on this. Now, one last question before I let you go. I think, by the way, you would be an outstanding next Federal Reserve Board chairman. You know more about the Fed policy than anyone. But what worries me, David, and you and I have talked about this privately, I look over there at the Fed and this kind of temple over there, and I see 300 PhD economists, almost all of whom are Keynesian and don't believe in the supply side model that you and I believe in, that you were just talking about, that increasing the supply of goods and services is a good way to bring down inflation. They seem to think the opposite, David. They think the more you produce, the more inflation you're going to get.
That's right. Growth causes inflation in their models.
It's ridiculous.
Think what we've got. These are 50-year-old models that haven't been updated. Think if you were trying to run computers with chips that were made 50 years ago. That's what you would get. It's a joke. Yeah. And that permeates the way the Fed literally thinks that its job is to control demand within the economy. It's ridiculous because they're up against regulation.
They can't control demand. The only thing they can control is the supply of money, not the demand for money.
Exactly. And the added problem right now is the government is borrowing so short term that when the Fed keeps the interest rates high, the way they're doing right now, it's the government that's spending more money. So it just digs the hole deeper and deeper. Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. We need new models, and that, I think, is going to take new people.
I couldn't agree more. David Malpass, thanks so much for taking time off on your busy Saturday afternoon. That is David Malpass, the former president of the World Bank, who was kind enough to take some time off to educate us about the economy. Folks, we'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.